Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The death toll rises following a 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Turkey and Syria Monday. Plus, hundreds of people in the Maritimes still feeling the impact of a weekend cold snap that led to burst water pipes and power outages. And China accuses the U.S. of overreacting and shooting down a Chinese balloon after it crossed the U.S.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has declared 7 days of national mourning following the deadly quakes that hit the country. At least 3,400 people were killed in Turkey and Syria, and thousands more were injured. The 7.8 magnitude quake struck just before dawn in Turkey's southeast, sending terrified residents outside in the rain and snow to escape falling debris. Offers of help are pouring in from dozens of countries in the aftermath, as well as from the European Union and NATO. The region sits atop major fault lines and is frequently shaken by earthquakes, including one in 1999 in northwest Turkey, that killed some 18,000 people. Meantime, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada stands ready to help, while Global Affairs Canada has not yet commented on the situation in the two countries. Trudeau called the reports and images out of the earthquake region devastating. The quake hit a region on both sides of the border shaped by more than a decade of civil war in Syria. And speaking of earthquakes, Western New Yorkers were startled by an earthquake this morning that was felt in southern Ontario as well. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the earthquake as 3.8 in magnitude, matching the size of one recorded in November of 1999, while Earthquake Canada measured a 4.2 magnitude event. And here's one that hit really close to home for us. Over the weekend, a magnitude 3.9 quake hit British Columbia. It struck 41 kilometers from Kimberley, British Columbia at 9:30 p.m. on Saturday. Hundreds of people in the Maritimes are still feeling the impact of a weekend cold snap that led to burst water pipes and power outages. As of this morning, there were less than 1,000 Nova Scotia Power customers still in the dark, down from about 30,000 at the peak of the blackouts. The frigid temperatures forced many people to leave their homes after water pipes burst in a number of residences in parts of Atlantic Canada. China has accused the U.S. of overreaction and the indiscriminate use of military force in shooting down a Chinese balloon that traveled over U.S. airspace, saying that the move has damaged bilateral relations. The Pentagon has described the high-altitude balloon as a surveillance aircraft able to maneuver. A U.S. warplane shot it down on Saturday over the Atlantic Ocean after it had crossed the entire U.S. China said it was a weather balloon that had been blown off course. And opposition parties also want to know why Canadians weren't alerted earlier and what measures are taken to protect against Chinese spying, since the balloon drifted over Canadian territory as well. The federal government is offering a few details about the incursion of the suspected spy balloon. And RCMP say a woman was stabbed in a Red Deer grocery store following a confrontation with another woman. Police say it happened Friday in one of the aisles at a Real Canadian Superstore, and that the suspect lunged at the 23-year-old victim and stabbed her in the neck with an unknown object. The victim was taken to hospital, where she remains in stable condition. Police have released surveillance video images of the suspect in the hope that someone may be able to identify her. The suspect is described as a female with a light complexion, light brown hair, wearing a black jacket, black pants, white boots, and a white hoodie. She was seen with a male associate while in the store. And if you have information about this offense, or you think you know who is responsible, please contact the Red Deer RCMP, your local police, or Crime Stoppers. Alberta Health Services has announced that cancer patients will now be treated with new technology from the world's most advanced radiation therapy in the treatment of tumors. Grants and funding for the project came in at an estimated $25 to $30 million. The Alberta created and built LINAC MR machine will begin with clinical trials at the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton.
Can we do this? Because if we do this, we have significant improvement in cure rates, less side effects, and less treatment times. What else do you want? Right now in Alberta, 50% of all cancers get radiation as a treatment. Other places in Europe, they may even more radiation, 60, 70%. At this moment, it's about 50%. This machine now, because of its ability to take care of motion, especially in the abdominal area, liver, pancreas, kidney, lung, moves. Now you could treat the other 50% for all cancer tumors.
According to a 2022 report by the Canadian Cancer Society, the number of people living with cancer in our country has grown to over 1.5 million. The operating room at Canmore General Hospital is shutting down on weekends due to a shortage of nurses. The hospital says the closure means pregnant patients needing care must go to Calgary from Friday afternoon until Monday morning. The maternity clinic says the service disruption is expected to last until March 27th. According to the Alberta Health Services website, no other hospitals in the Calgary zone are experiencing temporary service disruptions, but 34 other sites across the province are, including 7 affecting obstetrics. There's no question that the pandemic affected everybody in one way or another, including our children. But how are parents to deal with nervous and anxious kids post-pandemic? Kathy Cook is a child, youth, and family therapist who says the best way to develop resiliency in your kids is to not to try to solve all of their problems and to allow your children to figure things out for themselves.
So we have to watch and protect and guide and be available and be present and let our kids know, hey, I'm on your side. I'm here to guide and protect and provide, but I'm not going to do everything for you because you need to learn for yourself how to make it happen.
You can catch the full interview with Kathy Cook and Hal Roberts coming up in the second half of the show. The Blood Tribe has reached an important step in an issue regarding a dispute on treaty lands. On February 2nd, the Supreme Court of Canada released its decision on the case of the Big Claim. The Blood Tribe argues that the Canadian government failed to implement the treaty land entitlement when Treaty 7 was signed in 1877. There was an appeal in 2019, and a federal court decision was found that the First Nation was entitled to a reserve of 710 square miles, but were only given just under 548 square miles. A hearing date with the Supreme Court has not yet been determined. Bridge City News reached out to the Blood Tribe for comment on the story, but they declined an interview. Crews from 3 stations responded to a house fire on Lethbridge's north side Sunday evening at approximately 7:12 p.m. A blaze was reported at 1550 St. Francis Road North. The fire was quickly controlled. There were no occupants present when firefighters arrived, and no injuries were reported. The damage is estimated at $150,000 to $200,000. The cause of the fire is under investigation. The city of Lethbridge is recruiting census takers for this year's census. Those who are interested in participating as a census taker would need to be available for a 3-week period and enjoy walking for long periods of time. An official with the city says it's important that they recruit enough people as it helps to calculate the number of people living in Lethbridge.
We attract a special crowd that do census takers, people who really enjoy going out there, enjoy the walk and getting the information. We require the information because, as I mentioned, for planning purposes, so it's very useful to us. And the information, there's about 43,000 households, so it's a lot of work, but we all enjoy it. And so we would encourage people to apply to census@lethbridge.ca.
Applications to apply will be accepted until the 24th, and successful candidates will be notified by mid-March. Former Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman was back out in our city last Thursday for a presentation at SACPA on what he learned about finances during his time as mayor. Spearman was also asked during the session for solutions on Lethbridge's homelessness issue and why it seems to stay stagnant compared to other bigger cities in Alberta like Calgary and Edmonton.
It's a little bit more our own fault. In those cities, they have community organizations funded with business and from the community to come up with possible solutions for homelessness. And they have projects that they've built that came out of these committees. I don't think we've got to the point where our committees will recommend a homelessness solution and actually implement it. We're still in the stage where the committee can go only so far. When the plans become public, there's a negative reaction and we struggle to go forward.
Spearman served as the mayor of Lethbridge from 2013 till 2021 and was a longtime trustee on Lethbridge's Holy Spirit Catholic School Division Board. The Interfaith Food Bank is in need of donations. The food bank says they're running dangerously low on perishable items and are asking for the public to help. Executive Director Danielle McIntyre says coming out of a very busy Christmas season, the food went out and as quickly as it came in, and now they're not able to keep up with the demand.
We have often received financial donations that we would use to go out and buy more items for our food hampers. And we primarily rely upon community donations as well as stuff that we pick up from the grocery stores that isn't quite perfect in terms of the perishable items, which right now, because groceries are so very expensive, a lot of the grocers are able to sell that stuff, which means they don't end up in our pile. So we are exceptionally low on perishable items and are really encouraging community members to help us out if they can.
Anyone who's interested in donating to the food bank can do so by getting in touch with them directly. It was another record-breaking year in the packing of shoeboxes for Operation Christmas Child. A total of 415,072 shoeboxes were packed with care by Canadians, along with 88,717 of those being put together by Albertans. That is an increase of 11% compared to 2021. Lethbridge also came up huge with 2,150 shoeboxes. Frank King, the News Media Relations Manager for Samaritan's Purse Canada, explained which countries were gifted with these special boxes.
Shoeboxes packed by generous Canadians are distributed to countries in Central America, places like Guatemala, Costa Rica, El Salvador. They're also distributed in French-speaking Africa, places like Senegal and the Gambia. And this year, 2 new countries where Canadian shoeboxes are going. That's the Philippines, and the country that really excites me is the Ukraine. So Ukrainian children who have lost so much in the past year from this horrible invasion, they're going to get Canadian shoeboxes to bring them joy and hope as well.
Since 1993, Operation Christmas Child has collected and delivered more than 209,000 shoeboxes to children in over 170 countries. A very familiar Hollywood face is being asked to be this year's parade marshal for the Spock Days celebration in the town of Vulcan. Following an episode on Conan O'Brien podcast, the comedian became aware of the Star Trek themed town and soon became fascinated with its inception of the TV franchise. Shortly after, the town then extended an invitation to O'Brien to be the parade marshal and costume cosplay judge.
Like, he was on there and he was so fascinated with what we were doing here and all that stuff. And he at the end of the podcast, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, he says, "Oh, I'm going to Vulcan, tell the people I'm coming to Vulcan." So we thought, well, why not throw that out there to him and see if he'd be interested in being the parade marshal and the costume cosplay judge. So we thought we'd send him the invite, wouldn't hurt, and see what happens from there. So it's just, if he's willing to come, it'd be great for sure. I know we've had lots of different support from different people in different groups, radio groups and TV, things like that. So we're going to just kind of keep pushing and see what we hear and just hope for the best. Fingers crossed.
This year's Spock Days will take place from July 28th till the 30th. Estate planning does matter if you're hoping to preserve as much of your wealth and assets as possible for future generations. Stephen Mogden is a partner at the firm Stringham here in Lethbridge. He says sometimes people can go too far when leaving an inheritance, to the point that they aren't living their lives to their fullest.
We do see situations where people who are, they have an estate and they're going to be distributing some estate to loved ones, family members, friends, what have you. They sometimes go through really extraordinary measures to try to maximize their estate and provide something to those beneficiaries. Sometimes to the extent where they're not really living their life to the fullest. And we really hate to see that, right? An estate should be kind of what's left over once you've lived your life, right?
Mogden will also discuss why it's important for unmarried adults without dependents to plan their estate and what options they have if they don't have anyone that they can leave their inheritance to. That interview with BCN's Naveen Day is coming up following business news. United Conservative Party MLA Tracy Ellard says she won't be seeking re-election when Albertans head to the polls in May. Ellard says in a statement posted yesterday on Facebook that due to Parkinson's disease, which she was diagnosed with in March of 2020, she has decided to step away from her public life to focus on her health and her family. Ellard notes successful symptoms management, quote, does not align well with the scheduled lifestyle and demands placed on an MLA. The Grand Prairie representative was appointed Parliamentary Secretary for Civil Liberties in December by Premier Danielle Smith. The U.S. abortion debate is shifting to funding as states take control of policymaking. Liberal cities and states are funding efforts to provide access to abortion, while red states are seeking ways to support centers that discourage it. Months after Kansas voters affirmed abortion rights in August, the Republican-controlled legislature is considering millions in state funds. The staff at Insight Center in Lawrence, Kansas, say they don't refer clients to abortion providers. Instead, they discuss abortion as an option.
For those women that want to go ahead and have their baby, we don't want them to think they can't do it because they don't have a home. And I do know that the tax credits will provide, we'll be able to use them in maternity home as well. Regardless of the decision, we want them to know that they're not walking through this alone. And then when they make their decision, we recognize it's their decision, we provide them support.
We don't just say, parent your child and go to the streets. We have the boutique, and if they come to the education mentoring classes, they can earn everything they need. Not what they want, maybe, but everything they need for the first year of the baby's life. So we try to help set them up so that realistically and practically they can raise that child.
Supporters say the effort to financially support centers shows the anti-abortion movement is addressing the needs of families and children, while critics say the effort falls short of what's necessary. While the Maritimes are still feeling the effects of the weekend cold snap, the southern Alberta region is experiencing some lovely plus temperatures and a lot of Chinook winds too. I'll be right back with a full look at your local and national forecast. Welcome back. A beautiful week is shaping up in our region, and we're seeing mainly plus temperatures and definitely above average for this time of year, albeit it is going to be a bit of a windy one. So overnight this evening, we're looking at 90 kilometer per hour winds. That wind should diminish to about 70 by morning, and then we're looking at 60 kilometer winds from the west on a Tuesday, but a high of 9 degrees and partly cloudy skies there. So mostly staying in the pluses, we're looking at a high of 2 degrees on Wednesday, 3 degrees the high for Thursday with mainly sunny skies. Lots of sunshine on Friday, and what a way to start the weekend. Look at that, they're double digits. We're expecting a high of 10 degrees by Friday, up to 5 on Saturday and 8 degrees on Sunday. So I am loving it. I'm gonna just declare springtime already, considering the average high for this time of year is 0, and we're gonna be well above that. Minus 12, the average low. 18 was our high temperature on this day back in 1963. We're gonna be close to that, so I say that's worth celebrating. Minus 28, that was the low temperature on this day back in 1994. Sun rose this morning at 7:57 a.m. So we're now in that 7 o'clock hour. So sun rising earlier and setting later. We're looking at 5:34 for our sunset this evening, giving us 9 hours and 37 minutes of daylight. Okay, so on the west coast tomorrow, Victoria looking at a 60% chance of showers and 60 winds in the Juan de Fuca Strait. 9 degrees the high there, 6 the high in Vancouver. Vancouver also looking at a chance of rain, the possibility of some thunderstorms there. Sunshine in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 4 degrees and a high of 7 in Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud and 20 to 40 winds. Now in the prairies, we're looking at much warmer conditions as well. Look at these pluses, especially in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan sitting at a high of 3 degrees with mainly clear skies. Clear skies also in Regina tomorrow, expecting a high of 2 degrees. -1 the high in Winnipeg, and I'm going to say that that is pretty great for Winnipeg in February. Loving it. Okay, in the central part of the region, also much warmer than what they were seeing last week. Do you remember that crazy cold spell that they had? Not so much anymore. 5 degrees the high in Toronto. Toronto seeing some showers. Now we're looking at a mix of snow with the freezing drizzle in Ottawa. 0 the high there, and a high of 0 in Montreal. Montreal expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, and also could see the possibility of some freezing drizzle there. High of -4 in Fredericton tomorrow with mainly clear skies. 0 the high in Halifax. Charlottetown, -4 the high, but 70 km/h winds along the coast. And St. John's is looking at mainly cloudy skies. -4 for the high, and also some blowing snow in exposed areas. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Hudson's Bay is shutting down 2 department stores in Alberta, saying the decision reflects market changes and the company's vision for the future. The retailer says its stores in Banff and the northeast Edmonton area of Londonderry will close in August. The company says it will continue to serve the community at its 4 other Edmonton locations and through its website. Last month, the company announced it was laying off 2% of its total workforce, estimated to be about 250 employees in corporate roles, largely within Canada. Dell has announced it's cutting roughly 6,600 jobs as layoffs continue in the big tech industry. The computer maker says the steps it's taken to stay ahead of the eroding market conditions are no longer enough, as it's slashed its payroll by 5%. Large and small tech companies went on a hiring spree over the past several years as increased demands for their products, software, and services surged, with millions of people working remotely. However, even with all the layoffs so far this year, most tech companies are still vastly larger than they were 3 years ago. Google says Canadian employees affected by recently announced job cuts are being told today whether they've been laid off. But Google Canada spokesperson Lauren Scully wouldn't say how many Canadians are being laid off or in what departments or cities they work. She says Canada remains an important and priority market for Google. The tech giant announced in mid-January that 12,000 of its workers would be laid off. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 129 points on the day to finish at 20,628. The Dow was down 34 points to 33,891. The S&P 500 was down 25 to 4,111, and the Nasdaq was down 119 points to finish at 11,887. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 72 cents to 74.11 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to 246 US. Gold was down 2 cents to 1867.46 US an ounce, and silver was even at 22.27 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at 11.92 per bushel, barley's at 9.14, canola is at 18.89, and corn is at $11.18 per bushel. Live cattle were up 55 cents to 160.83. Feeder cattle were up $1.60 to 187.70. Lean hogs were up 3 cents to 75.05. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.36 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada is ready to assist Turkey and Syria in earthquake recovery efforts. Authorities in those countries are reporting that more than 3,400 people are dead and thousands more were injured after the powerful early morning quake and a series of aftershocks. Residents immediately rushed out into the rain and snow to escape falling debris, while those who were trapped cried for help. The death toll is expected to rise as workers continue to pull out bodies and desperate families wait for news on trapped loved ones. Coming up, BCN's Naveen Day talks with lawyer Stephen Mogden about estate planning for single adults. And hey, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Lethbridge City Council wants to hear from you. The city is exploring the option of harmonizing speed limits in both playground and school zones. During this process, community feedback is being collected to help inform City Council's decision. Lethbridge residents are encouraged to learn more about this proposal and provide their feedback through an online survey which will be open until February 19th. You can find the survey at getinvolvedlethbridge.ca/harmonized playground zones. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
There are some Canadians that spend up to 100% of their net income any which way they see fit. Must be nice. They are unmarried adults without dependents. And while Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving might be lonely times for them, they get to live their lives with little to no accountability to a partner or a child. But what happens when they die and there is no last will in place? To talk more about estate planning for singles is Stephen Mogden. He is a partner at the law firm Stringham in Lethbridge, Alberta. Stephen, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me, Naveen.
So Stephen, first off, it is plainly clear why a person who is married and or with children should plan their estate, or at the very least, write a last will and testament. For some of our single viewers, it may not be so clear for them if they don't have anyone they think really needs to inherit their possessions or take care of their affairs once they pass. So, is estate planning still important for singles to consider?
Yeah, and I get this question a lot from young people, usually young people that are not married, have this question for me. And my advice is, well, there's a few points to consider. Number one, where they're at in their life, they may not have a lot of assets. They may not have, that marital relationship or kids that they would be considering as beneficiaries. But that's not going to be the case forever. Things are going to change for them. They're going to get older. They're going to acquire assets. They're going to have relationships and that sort of thing. And so a person should start to think about that early. One of the main reasons for doing that is if you don't, if you just allow your estate to be dealt with through what our legislation in Alberta provides for people that don't have a will, you're not in control of how that's going to be dealt with. And for some people, that might work out okay. For others, it may well not. And it might actually lead to some conflict among family members and that sort of thing.
And what happens to the debt once you pass if there's no one to pass it on to?
Well, so when you pass away, if you have debt, if your estate has debt, that's going to be satisfied through your assets, the estate assets. In some situations, people will pass away and have more debt than they have in terms of assets. And in that circumstance, the legislation deals with that here in Alberta. Some types of debts are preferred, things like funeral expenses and that sort of thing. But then as long as the person that's administering the estate, whether it's an executor or an administrator, as long as they do that correctly, they won't be held liable for those debts, and neither will the estate. So it's important to have some advice if you're in that circumstance. But certainly we don't deal with situations where, or we don't see situations where, a lot of debt is being visited on beneficiaries that don't have any ability to pay for that.
Okay, so I just wanted to take a more lighthearted approach for just a moment here, because I must admit I fall into the latter group because I'm not married, I don't have children, and I can't be the only one who has thought to themselves, at least at one point, wait a second here. If I know I'm going to be close to the end of my life, couldn't I just give away my valuables while I'm still alive and then rack up my credit, take some expensive trips, and then let the courts settle my debts with the table scraps of my estate that are left over?
No, it's just you, Naveen. Nobody else thinks that. No, I'm just kidding. No, a lot. I've had that question before, and I do like the lighthearted questions around this because it's a very serious topic, but sometimes it's a little too serious, right? When I was going through law school, the professor that I took wills and estates from made it a point to say very early on, I think it was the first day, this is a fact of life. This is stuff that has to get dealt with. So, I mean, don't sort of tiptoe around it or anything like that. Deal with it head on, and that's the best approach for everybody. If you have that crystal ball and you know exactly when you're going to pass away, then by all means book the trips and ride it out that way. And I wish the best of luck to you. Most people, unfortunately, don't know that. So for a lot of people that do know, approximately when they're going to be passing away, it's likely a situation where they don't have the health that they're going to be able to enjoy those trips and that sort of thing. So we don't see that a lot, but there is, lots of people will say as their estate plan, they're going to, spend everything during their lifetime, and there's going to be nothing for the kids, right? And I mean, people say that jokingly, but by all means, live your life to the fullest. Just to turn that on a bit of a serious note for a moment, we do see situations where people who are, they have an estate and they're going to be distributing some estate to loved ones, family members, friends, what have you. They sometimes go through really extraordinary measures to try to maximize their estate and provide something to those beneficiaries. Sometimes to the extent where they're not really living their life to the fullest, and we really hate to see that, right? An estate should be kind of what's left over once you've lived your life, right? You do the best you can to maximize what you earn, what you're able to acquire, and that sort of thing, because you want to have a good standard of living and all that stuff. But that's for every generation, right? Every generation goes through that. So if you're living sort of the end of your life to be able to provide something to the younger generation, maybe that's not the best way to approach it. So, and I've had to say that to people before.
Great answer. Now, I just want to draw from that previous scenario again for one more question. A little bit more on a serious note, though. What about cases where there is malicious intent behind who your estate goes to? Like, let's say there's two people that feuded throughout their lives, and one decides to have the last laugh by assigning their estate to their opponent, but then gives away most of the assets prior to passing, leaving only the debt behind. Are there safeguards in place to prevent this from happening?
There are. Usually the first safeguard, in fact, is the lawyer that's meeting with the person to draw up that will, because you should be getting that information from that person about who their beneficiaries are and what they want to leave to those beneficiaries. And through that process, if you're learning, if I'm learning from my client that this is what their intention is, they have somebody that it's been a lifelong battle and they want to do this type of thing, I'm really going to dissuade them from that. And I might even say to them, if you want to do this, I'm not your guy to do this, right? Because I firmly believe an estate plan should be done right, and it should be for the best of intentions. That aside, if a person did go through that and they were able to create a will that did that, there are safeguards in place where, if there's more debt than there are assets, like I say, a beneficiary doesn't necessarily have to take that on if the estate has been administered correctly. And the person who's administering the estate, usually an executor, sometimes called an administrator, if they're doing it correctly, they're not going to have any personal liability for that either. So it's certainly possible to avoid that.
Great. Now, in addition to a last will and testament, what other documents are important in estate planning?
And so usually when we're doing a will for someone, we're also encouraging them to do a personal directive and a power of attorney. And there's a few reasons for that. The will deals with what's going to happen with their property, their stuff, when they pass away. But we often go through a period in life where, before we pass away, where we have a diminished capacity or we've completely lost capacity and we can't make decisions about our personal affairs or our financial affairs. And that's where the personal directive and the power of attorney come in. Very often when people are doing their will, the person that they're going to appoint in their will to be their executor is probably also the person they're going to want to appoint to be the person making decisions for them under the personal directive. So those are personal decisions, healthcare decisions, where they're going to live, that type of thing, and also the same person who's going to act as the attorney under their power of attorney, and those are for financial decisions. So it's a good idea to do them all at the same time. And they're really good to have, right? If you go through that scenario where you've lost your capacity, whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, just sort of general aging, an accident, anything like that, and somebody has to make decisions for you. If you haven't appointed someone through those documents, then someone's going to have to go to the court and get an order for guardianship and trusteeship, and that can be a very intimidating process, can be a lengthy process, it's just a lot easier to deal with it by creating those documents, the personal directive and the power of attorney, and they're fairly short documents. They're not difficult to do. They're easy to understand. So we do encourage people to do that. Outside of those, in terms of estate planning documents, we will see situations where people might want to put in place a trust, like an inter vivos trust, so a trust while they're still alive. And the purpose for that generally is to be able to distribute funds to beneficiaries while you're still alive, right? And so we often see that with kids, particularly kids who are away from home and that sort of thing. And the parent wants to start to, get that transition process going, where they're not just sort of sitting on all of their assets. They're providing some money for kids. So trusts are a little bit complicated sometimes, and they're not for everybody. It depends certainly on the circumstances, but that's another document that we'll see for sure.
Now, for those that really have not a single person to inherit their estates, let's say they're the youngest of all the siblings, never married, never had any kids, what are the alternatives to leaving your belongings and to someone else, or can we just talk about trust funds and scholarships and charitable donations for a bit?
Oh, for sure. And so I used to think that it was an extremely unlikely, uncommon situation where a person had absolutely no beneficiaries, and so they didn't know where to put their estate. But I have recently seen a situation where a person left their estate, and it wasn't massive. It was under $150,000, but they left it to a charitable institution in town because they had done a bunch of things with that institution throughout their life. And the story of it is that they had gone into the lawyer and basically said kind of what your question contains. I have nobody. I don't have anybody close that I want to give this to. What should I do? And the lawyer that they did that with had suggested this charitable institution. And so the fellow said, okay, let's do that. And so that's one way to do it. So that sort of legacy giving in your will is important for a lot of people. Some people will do it as a specific part of their estate planning, where they're definitely giving a portion to, the SPCA or, something like that. Some people will use it as sort of a safety valve, right? If, for example, they've said everything's going to go to my kids, or if I don't have any kids and I have grandkids, then it'll go to grandkids. But if nobody's around in that scenario, if there's no beneficiaries, truly, if you have that sort of safety valve where you're giving your estate to a charity, to your church, to a women's shelter, whatever the case may be, then at least somebody's getting it, and it's not going back to the province, because that is ultimately what can happen to an estate where there truly are no beneficiaries. Is it can pull out the legal language, it can escheat to the Crown, and I don't think anybody really wants to see that except for the government, but your average person doesn't want to see that. So, I mean, if I take myself, for example, I have a very close association with the YMCA here in Lethbridge. And so that's part of my estate planning, is a gift for the YMCA. So, something that I encourage people to look at doing. And most of the time, when I encourage people to do that, they'll say, well, I don't really know where to do that. And then they'll come back to me a little bit later on and they'll say, yeah, these are the things that are important to me. And that's what I want in there.
And it's all about leaving a legacy too. I mean, like the name Cor Van Ray obviously like comes to mind when we talk about that, especially with the YMCA. Now, singles are often focused on themselves, their careers, and the life that they create for themselves, mostly because they can. Assuming one is healthy, at what age should you sit down and start planning your estate?
So there's the technical correct answer, and there's the answer of what most people do. The correct answer is you should do it once you turn 18, right? You should at least be appointing people who are going to be able to make decisions for you if there was some sort of accident and you were rendered incapable of making decisions about your affairs. So we would always encourage people to have a personal directive and a power of attorney in place in case something like that happens. Those people often will not have property that they're going to, be able to distribute, but they might come into that sooner than they might think, right? And I kind of alluded to that off the top of the interview here. People might themselves come into an estate, right? Their parent might pass away, and through that they might receive, a bunch of money or property. They should have a plan on how they want to deal with it. Typically, when we're dealing with younger people, most of the time they're sort of in their mid-20s when they start to look at, acquiring getting the first house kind of thing, and then, and kids come along and that sort of thing. Another important feature of the will is the ability to designate someone who will be guardian for an infant child. So that's an important part of it for younger people. The reality is a lot of people don't really start to consider sort of their own mortality and that type of thing until a little bit later, 30s, sometimes 40s. But it's tough to get people to think about that when they're young. Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, Stephen, but we really appreciate having you on the show today and giving us these insightful answers.
Navina, pleasure.
Over the last few years, we've seen a lot of challenges and people have really struggled, especially coming out of the pandemic. You add inflation into the mix, and it makes things even worse. Many of our young people are having a tough time dealing with depression and anxiety right now. So how, as parents, can we really help our kids be more confident and resilient? Today's guest may have some suggestions for us. Dr. Kathy Cook is a child development specialist and president of Celebrate Kids, Inc. Her latest book is called Resilient Kids, Raising Them to Embrace Life with Confidence. And she joins us now from Texas. Kathy, welcome to Bridge City News.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. So Kathy, what really motivated you to write Resilient Kids?
Well, your introduction was really appropriate. During the COVID pandemic crisis, I saw too many kids defining themselves by loss, not by what they had, not by their strengths and their victories, but what they did not have. And that's not appropriate. I wanted to make sure that parents knew that they could help their kids stand back up and walk out of the negative circumstances that they found themselves in. It's so important.
So how has the pandemic really impacted our younger generation? Maybe we can begin with the fact that a lot of the kids were isolated from their friends and their classmates.
Right. And that's not how we're designed, right? We're designed for community. We're designed for fellowship. So they weren't aware of that. And a lot of us are the type of people who learn well with other people. We love to brainstorm and network and have those kind of sidebar conversations, even in the hallway and at lunch. And you took all of that away. And they were faced to do what we're doing here, looking into a camera. And it's just not ideal. So kids began to doubt their ability. They began to doubt their future, I think. And now depression, suicidal thoughts, that was all there prior to the pandemic, but it was amplified certainly during this crisis moment.
I guess when people are isolated, they don't have that interaction, that human connection with people who can actually physically touch that individual, give your best friend a hug. That makes it that much more of a challenge. So, Kathy, how would you really define resiliency, and why is it so important for kids today?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I define it as readily recovering from difficulty, readily recovering, not staying down in the valley, not having a long-lasting pity party, but choosing to stand up and walk out of the defeat and the despair and the difficulty, running from a bully, knowing that that bully doesn't define me. So readily recovering, it starts as a choice, becomes a learned ability the more often we do it, and then it becomes a part of our character. And that's so critical, because then even when mom and dad aren't around to encourage me, I know that I can stand up and walk out and become the whole person that I was designed to be. Critically important. Without resiliency, we don't learn, we don't take risks, we don't grow, we don't develop a deep faith and a really good character.
So how can children best understand the real difference between failure and a mistake, and maybe learn, especially from their mistakes?
Yeah, it's so valuable, isn't it? We have to talk about it. They're not going to learn that unless we demonstrate it. So moms and dads and teachers and pastors and people like us who are out in the community, we need to understand that we're not perfect, and we need to let our kids see that we're not perfect so that they can admit to us that they're not perfect. Kids tell me all the time that if they think their mom and dad are perfect human beings, then they have a hard time admitting to their mom and dad that they're not. So let's do age appropriate, developmentally appropriate admission of failure and mistakes. I forgot to turn in a report to my supervisor. He's not happy with me. I'm going to have to earn back his trust because I made a mistake, and I'm unhappy. So I prayed about it and I apologize, and I'm going to get better at that time management factor. So we can talk to our kids about that. One of the things that's really valuable is to talk with our kids about words like mistakes and failure. Too many kids think that mistakes mean that they're stupid and failure means that they're bad. You and I know that's not the truth. Mistakes mean that we maybe haven't had enough experience, we haven't practiced enough, maybe we didn't study enough, but we're not stupid. And if we fail, I don't even like that word. It's not that we're bad. We have to talk about it. Define it in your home. In our home, this is what we mean by those words.
You know, it's a real challenge as well. I'm a parent too. I've got 2 kids, and it was really tough, especially when they were younger. When you see them going down a path, it's going to lead to destruction, because you went down the same path yourself. You made the same mistakes. I don't want my kids making the same mistakes that I did, but sometimes as a parent, you got to let go and let God.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Put them in God's care. Provide the boundaries that you can, but you know what? Kids have to learn on their own that foolishness results in consequences that are uncomfortable. If we overprotect our kids and we helicopter and we're a drone, looking over them and making sure they don't ever make a mistake, then they're not going to be strong. They'll be weak and they'll come running to us every time they're in trouble. And I doubt that that's what parents want.
So you want to really develop character within your children, I guess, so they can respond to some of the hardships in the world a little more appropriately.
Absolutely. Don't bubble wrap them, save the bubble wrap for your grandmother's, beautiful vase, if you will. But let your kids know, hey, I'm here for you. I'm protecting and guiding and providing for you. If you choose to do that, there will be a consequence, and then I'll help you talk that through at the end.
Now, Kathy, you write that there are actually 5 core things a child needs to really build resiliency. What would they be?
Oh, super. Security. Who can I trust? If they don't trust us, they won't take risks, and then they won't learn. So are we honest, and are we there for them? Identity. Who am I? I'm bright and creative and careful and diligent. Your kids need to know their strengths so that they can rely on themselves in those challenging moments. Belonging. Who wants me? They have to have relationship skills and friendship skills. And they have to understand who to walk away from that's not good for them and who to walk toward who would be a blessing. So security, identity, belonging leads to purpose. Why am I alive? When kids know that they were created on purpose with purpose, they will develop their strengths and they will see that a challenge or a mistake is something they can overcome because there's a bigger picture to life. And I was created to be a someone and to do something valuable. So I need to step up and become that. And then we get to competence. What do I do well? Everybody's created on purpose with good gifts that they can use to be a blessing to others. So we need to help them see their beauty and see their strength, which is wrapped up in their purpose, so that they'll be willing to overcome the challenge, bounce back, and become who they were created to be.
So how can parents really have healthy and honest conversations with their children concerning their needs?
Yeah, be available, first of all, my friend. Be available. Put your phone down. Prioritize your kids as is appropriate. Not that they're the center of your universe, but that they matter to you. Let them know that. Feel their pain first. Kids tell me all the time that we are unsafe to them if we problem solve too quickly. So you develop resiliency when you feel their pain. Bethany, I'm sad with you. I'm so sorry that happened. Jeremiah, that must have been a scary thing. Man, I'm sad for you. Feel their pain, acknowledge that it was difficult for them, and then help them solve the problem. Help them figure out what they can do next. Don't necessarily do it for them, but problem solve, talk to them, brainstorm with them, make a list maybe of 3 or 4 things they can do differently in the next 2 or 3 days. So be available. Talk in the dark. Also, just a quick recommendation, talk in the dark. Kids tell me they don't want to look into our faces when they know that we're going to be disappointed. They don't want to see the pain in our eyes. So sometimes they'll be more vulnerable in a dark space, all alone, without the siblings around.
So you believe that parents must really pay attention to what children believe about their mistakes and failures, and maybe as parents, try to encourage our kids not to let the lows get too low.
Yeah, come on. So true. It's a season, right? They come and they go. So share how you walked out of your valleys. Share that maybe you distanced yourself from a person who was a negative naysayer, and you knew that you had value, and you knew that that person was not good for you because he said, you'll never amount to that. Who do you think you are to achieve that? No, you distance yourself from people who are not healthy for you. You stop going to the places that are not life affirming for you. You stop listening to music and watching the shows that bring you down into the valley, and you make sure that you know you're a person of worth who's worthy of blessing. And so you step out into that reality.
Now, many people, Kathy, would argue that spiritual resilience might be the most important resilience of all. How can we as parents be assured that our kids don't give up on God, but learn to trust Him more and really mature in their own faith?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I wish that we could assure it, right? I wish that we could have these perfect little boundaries and put kids in a box and they'll never doubt, because that's not possible. But there are some things we can do, and I'm glad you asked. I do think it's critically important that we talk about the relationship with Jesus is what drives us to our behavior. We worship, we read and meditate on the Word of God, we pray, we serve, we give, we attend church, because we're in a relationship with our best friend. We love God, the creator of it all, the author of the life letter, love letter, the Bible. We love His Son, Jesus, for all that He's done for us. So I don't pray to check it off my list. I don't read the Bible every morning so I feel like a good girl. I read it because it's a life letter, love letter that's going to build me up and offer me opportunity to walk on the right path. When you teach your children that we do what we do because of who we are and because it changes who we are, then they take that with them. And it's not a church that they go to, but it's a behavior that becomes a part of who they are. Also, very quickly, the names of God and the names of Christ are really important. Our kids need to know the whole of God. If they only know one little thing about God and one little name of Christ, and they feel like that part failed them, then they give up. So make sure your kids know all about God and Jesus as much as possible.
So what's your suggestion to parents whose children may be influenced by others with different beliefs?
Well, first of all, praise God that you know that. So if you know that I'm really proud of you, because that means you're paying attention, and that's really cool. Many teenagers will begin to look for other voices because they want to know if other people agree with you. Is my dad the only one who thinks that church is essential? So don't be afraid if they start to look for other voices, but certainly teach them discernment and be aware. Why would you talk to your soccer coach? Well, first of all, why would you allow your kid to play soccer with a coach that doesn't have a biblical worldview? That's a whole nother speech, whole nother presentation we could talk about. But know who your kids are listening to, know the lyrics of the songs that they're listening to, the people who they're hanging out with. Don't be alarmed, teach them discernment and say, hey, why do you believe your coach is right? Convince me your coach is right when your mom and I are raising you in these ways. Have discussion, have dialogue, have conversation.
Why do you think it is, I find this kind of odd as well as a parent, that sometimes a stranger or a new friend has more of an influence on our children than we do? Our children may be suffering from low self-esteem, and I as a father will say to my daughter, you know what, you're beautiful and you're smart, you're going to go quite far in this life. And she's like, I don't believe it from my dad. But then somebody she just met said, you're beautiful and smart from what I got to know. And they believe that person over their own father. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's frustrating, right? Kids tell me, our dad has to say that. He's our dad. He has to. He doesn't have a choice. He has to believe good things. So they're looking for affirmation. They're looking for, is my dad right? Can I really believe him? I would also say that moms and dads, we can get better at giving them the proof. You're going to amount to a lot because you're a diligent young lady. I see that you're careful and that you care about details, and your nonfiction writing is accurate. You proofread, you make sure your resources are right. I wonder if you could follow in my footsteps and be a journalist. A lot of kids doubt because the voices are loud from the other side. So provide the proof that you're right, specifically compliment and specifically correct, and they'll keep coming to you for insight. They do want to believe their parents. They really do.
So show some examples, absolutely. Now, Kathy, you had an amazing opportunity to observe a newborn giraffe when you were in Africa recently. Now, how did this really reinforce your beliefs about letting children struggle to learn what they need rather than, like you mentioned earlier, bubble protect or bubble wrap our kids?
Right. Oh, it was so much fun. I was in Nigeria, Africa, and about 10 minutes after the baby was born, we were there. The mother was huge and standing over the baby and attentive. And every time we clicked a camera, she would pop her head over in our direction. She was so aware of what the baby was doing. And the baby was down on the ground, camouflaged, trying desperately to raise its neck. It would raise it and would flop back down like a piece of spaghetti. It was so amazing to watch this. But you know what was so interesting? The mom never helped except to lick a little bit of the fluid off the baby. The mother's neck would come down and lick and almost caress with the tongue. That mother could have taken its big head, put it under the baby and lifted it to its feet. But that mom knew that baby needed to learn on its own how to stand up and how to keep standing. If the baby wouldn't have done it on its own, its muscles never would have been strong enough to hold the weight of itself up. So we have to watch and protect and guide and be available and be present and let our kids know, hey, I'm on your side. I'm here to guide and protect and provide, but I'm not going to do everything for you because you need to learn for yourself how to make it happen. Yeah, it was a profound example of the ideal relationship.
I can just imagine. Now, you mentioned guide, protect, provide, but also being optimistic. I think it's really important to share with our kids, a sense of optimism. How important is that as they develop?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I was actually stunned when I did my research at how very important it is. I've always known that. I think believers need to be optimistic. I think there's a lot of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic as we look at today, tomorrow, and the far distant future. So is your glass half full? One of the resources I read, I love this. Doesn't really matter how full your glass is, just have a pitcher nearby. Like, are you the resource? Are you going to be able to fill your kids up? So to be full of hope, to look for what's right, to have a solution-focused mind, not a problem-centered orientation. It's a key. Your kids want to know if they come to you with a heartache, that you will love them in their moment of defeat and help them when they're ready to listen to your solutions. Yeah, to be optimistic and hopeful. It's essential. It's not easy. The world's a mess, but we can speak life into the mess and be part of the difference making.
Amen to that. And I think about with God too, how he loves us unconditionally. That's what we should do with our children as well.
Amen.
Dr. Kathy Cook is the president of Celebrate Kids, Inc. and author of Resilient Kids, Raising Them to Embrace Life with Confidence. Kathy, thanks so much for joining us today from Texas.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.